Welcome to Native Bidaské, Native News Online's weekly spotlight on the people making news and leading change in Indian country.
Welcome to another episode of Native Bidaské. I'm Levi Rickert, host of today's show, and I am the editor of Native News Online. We have with us today Austin Shamlin from the Traverse Project, and he's down in Texas, right? Austin?
We're based in Texas. I actually I live right outside of DC, so I'm here most of the time. But yeah, we're based
great.
In Texas.
In the Traverse group has been working on something called the Task Force Red Hand, right? And it's a project that deals with the missing and murdered Indigenous people. So can you talk about that? How
Absolutely.
that came to be?
So Traverse Project is a nonprofit focused in on countering human trafficking. We do that through data intelligence, and we try to support law enforcement the best that we can. We focus in on kind of providing resources to law enforcement that they don't traditionally have, whether that be training or data or analytics. We wanted to look for a domestic project, and U.S. law enforcement is pretty capable of handling most crime sets that they deal with. However, we saw that this one crime set in the United States, that there was not a lot of effort being put towards it. And as you know, probably better than I do, tribal law enforcement is struggling with resources and funding and all of these things, depending on which part of the country that they're in. So we wanted to make sure that we are providing tribal law enforcement with the resources that they need to, that when a victim that either comes up missing or murdered, that they have those resources at their disposal to get some success, a successful resolution out of that case.
And what has been the reception among tribal officials, tribes across Indian country?
Sure, it's been very well received. From law enforcement and tribal leadership, whether it's at the council level or the executive staff, it's been very well received. I think everybody realizes that this is a problem that needs additional resources to take care of. The mere fact of the last real data points we have are from 2016, where there was 5,712 cases of MMIW or MMIP. And the FBI had only investigated about 116 of those cases. So, there are some very large gaps between Native law enforcement, non-Native law enforcement, and the aftercare providing where do nonprofits fit into this and how we all work together to really solve this problem.
And why do you think there's such a lack of data collection in Indian country? Because you mentioned that the numbers you're working with are 2016, and as a journalist, we face the same problem. Why do you think that is?
Honestly, I think that the Indian country has just been forgotten in the United States. To be honest, there's no other explanation for it. The FBI has roughly 100 agents assigned to Indian country. The FBI doesn't typically work homicides and missing persons. So it's very difficult. And the jurisdictional complexities between tribal law enforcement and what they are allowed to investigate and what they aren't allowed to investigate, it's a mess, right? And there needs to be some resolution to it. And I think the first step in starting to fix this problem is getting kids back home to their families. And when I say kids, I don't care if you're 25 years old, you're someone's kid, right?
Well, I'm at that age where I call 20-year-olds kids. So.
Right, yeah. Me too.
Yeah. And I think, and I applaud what you're doing. I think, Native News Online, we've done a lot of stories through the years on MMIP, and some people call it as MMIR, relatives. But it was basically the same. And so much of what I looked to your website, you have a lot of things about human trafficking. How much of this can be the MMIP issue be really attached to the human trafficking that takes place in the United States and actually around the world?
Yeah, I think that once we, I can't answer that question with any certainty at this point. I think that once we start ingesting the data and start looking at the data, it's going to show that there is a significant portion of this does lead to some type of human trafficking, whether that is young women finding themselves, working in brothels in shale oil camps or in casinos or being trafficked into cities that are not in Indian country, finding their ways into Miami and Atlanta and Houston and other parts of the country where we know a lot of human trafficking happens. So I think there's going to be a combination of things, right? I think there's going to be a factor, drugs are definitely going to play a factor in some of these cases. The cartel activity that we've seen kind of increase on native land, I think that's going to play a factor. I think there's just a multitude of things that we're going to see once the data starts coming in.
Yeah, and actually, how long have you been working on this project?
So we have been concepting it out for the better part of a year, for just about all of 2024. And do you mind if I go into how the program works?
No, go ahead. I'd love that.
Yeah. So there are 3 tiers in this program, and we really wanted to make sure that we were kind of covering all of our bases, because I figured as we're putting this together, we're going to get one shot at this to get it right. And obviously there are things that will change as we go along and lessons learned, and we'll continue to sharpen the pencil as we go. But the first tier is we want to bring in kind of an awareness and education portion of it. And so we've got academia that is going to partner with tribal colleges. We want to get young kids involved in this fight. And whether that is them going into data analytics side of the house or creating programs for awareness that they can bring back to their communities, whether it be in their school systems, and parents, or tribal elders and healthcare workers and things like this, to help them identify what sextortion is and what human trafficking is, and what the real data is telling us about the MMIP problem, right? So that's tier 1. Tier 2 is our interdiction or our enhanced law enforcement solutions. And that is where Traverse Project specializes in data and analyzing that data and then giving law enforcement actionable intelligence that they can move and go and find somebody, or if they had a homicide, that they can find who was responsible for that, right? And then the last tier is our aftercare. And we've partnered with another nonprofit to head that. They are specializing in aftercare. That is a very small needle to thread. And that's something that I didn't feel comfortable with our organization taking that on, just because we don't know enough about aftercare, and I don't want to. It's you either succeed at it or you don't, and I didn't want to not succeed at it. So we brought in some help, and their job is to create aftercare programs that will go everywhere from what does job placement look like, what does mental health look like, all the aspects of that aftercare, the survivor care, and really setting somebody up for success. The last thing that we want is that we rescue somebody out of this situation, and then a year from now they end up right back in the same situation because their situation at home didn't change. So we want to make sure that young women and young men are set up for success with education and jobs and kind of moving forward with their life. So that's the 100,000-mile view of the program. I'm happy to answer any deep dive questions that you may have on it.
Well, among Native Americans, trust is a major factor. How does your company, your project, work to build that trust among families? And how does that trust, as it relates to the MMIP issue, and how does that trust factor into bringing justice for families?
Sure. So the first thing I want to say is, obviously, I'm a white guy, right? And I don't want this to be a situation of like the commonly used phrase, I think, is the white savior complex, right? Of me coming in or my guys coming in and saying, this is how you have to do this. This is the only, you need to listen to me because we're the experts. I wanted to include as many Native nonprofits as we possibly could. And, specifically with the aftercare, my kind of standard was it's fine for an outside or a non-native organization to kind of manage the aspect of how the whole program works, but we need to have native nonprofits that are kind of spearheading the aftercare portion of it. The last thing we want to look like, or we want the feeling of, is boarding schools, right? The Native community in the United States, it operates so much more different than any other portion of this country. And so we want to be respectful of culture and not overstep our limits. The other thing that we've done is we've created a board over top of the Task Force Red Hand. And Task Force Red Hand is not just Traverse Project. It is a multitude of organizations that have come together, some native, some non-native, academia, and for-profit companies as well. And so what we've done, so it's almost taken a life of its own. And what we've done is we've created this board, this advisory board that is going to be solely Native, and their job, influential members of the Native community, and their job is, one, to make sure that we stay on mission, two, that we stay culturally respectful, and three, to kind of solve any problems before they start, whether it's on our side or whether it's a problem that we're having at a reservation. And we are, most of my career was spent overseas. I spent about 80% of my career in different developing countries or conflict zones. And so one thing that I learned very early on in my career is not to go in and just kind of push your knowledge or the way you want to do things onto other people, right? Go in and be culturally respectful, sit down, listen a lot more than you talk, right? And I found that's working with us. We've met with Cherokee, Choctaw. We'll be meeting with Chickasaw Nation soon. I've spoke with members over at Pine Ridge Reservation. Just a variety of reservations and nations across the country, and people are embracing this. They think that this is a good thing to have. It's bringing local, state, federal law enforcement together with Native law enforcement. The one big thing, the more I researched this, the one big thing that I saw was, or that disturbed me, was that if my 8-year-old daughter went missing today, that there would be helicopters and dogs and police officers all over the place, Amber Alerts. That's not true on a reservation. It's just not the case. And that's not okay. So we need to fix that. We need to get the Amber Alert system working on reservations. We need to get a place that reservation or tribal police can call. And so we'll be setting up this operations center that will be 24/7. That any tribal officer that's participating in the project can pick up the phone, give the information that's needed, and there are analysts in real time that will give them actionable intelligence right then and there.
Is that the TRACE program that you're going to bring out in 2025?
So that is our TRACE team. We're stealing people from our TRACE team to be the analyst on this project. But yes, okay. It's same concept.
Well, that's great. And with the work you've already done, in your opinion, what policy changes are most urgently needed to address the MMIP issue and prevent future cases?
I think the tribal police need to have the authority to investigate crimes on their reservations. And I think that they need to, we need to have a more proactive federal, in the non-280 states, we need to have a more proactive federal prosecution. And we need to bring federal resources to these officers. If you're only investigating 116 cases out of almost 6,000, that's a big problem, right? And it's a resource problem. So part of Task Force Red Hand is it is providing a force multiplier to tribal law enforcement, right? And then also trying to build those bridges with state attorney general's offices, governor's offices, federal prosecutors, and non-native law enforcement, whether it be state, local, or federal.
Yeah, again, I will say I applaud what you're doing.
Thank you.
This issue is so vast, and as you mentioned, only 100 and some cases being investigated out of but 5,700 is quite tremendous. Uh, how did you actually get started with this in terms of reaching out to Native Americans?
So I'll go back to the beginning. My oldest sister was actually trafficked. She's adopted, and she's adopted from Vietnam. She was trafficked out of Vietnam 3 days before Laos fell. So quite a few years ago. A bad couple of years, but it all worked out great. She's got 2 beautiful grandchildren now, and trafficking just kind of followed my career. So when I went overseas, I saw a lot of really bad stuff. When I was a policeman, again, I was a police captain in DC government. We saw MS-13 members trafficking young Hispanic females that were unaccompanied minors that came across the border and then placed in DC. They were selling these young girls out of our high schools. Once I left there, I worked as the director of international operations for another nonprofit that does rescue type missions for human trafficking victims. And this became a passion of mine, helping people that need help and don't have the resources to help. So when we looked at this problem, we just, it was just mind blowing that this happens in the United States and nobody's talking about it. And we've gone to members of Congress, and it's kind of like, not to speak out of turn, but it's kind of like all of Indian country is forgotten about until you bring it up. And then they're like, oh yeah, of course we need to deal with that problem. And they're genuine about it. They've got a billion other things to think about or to deal with. But this is Americans in the United States. This isn't some faraway country that this is happening. And so we've dedicated my entire team. This is the priority of Traverse Project. Every one of our teams right now is working full force on this problem, building out our resources and coming up with how we're going to do this. And then, in January, we're going to make a push for funding from Congress. I want to thank you for reaching out to us and allowing us to interview with you. We need to get the word out, right? We need to get members of Congress on board with this. And 2025 is going to be a pilot program for Task Force Red Hand. And we're hoping that 2026 we can roll out nationwide, probably in a phased approach, but we want to be able to provide coast to coast any tribal law enforcement needs as assistance, the ability to get it.
Yeah, and as you well know, you coming from law enforcement, there's so many issues that are out there right now, and just with the internet and human trafficking and tells on and on and on, and so much of it really impacts Indian country. So as I said, I really applaud what you're doing. How can non-Native allies and organizations best support the efforts that you're working on right now, and how do they connect with you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the things that we're doing is we are building a coalition, right? Whether that be with reservations or tribes, or state level law enforcement, local law enforcement, academia, the list goes on and on. Non-Native organizations, for-profit organizations, what we need is, one, we need help to get the word out of what we're doing. Two, we need organizations. If you're a data company or you're an analytics company, reach out to us and we can figure out how you can help us better understand what is actually going on, because we can't fix the problem if we don't know what's actually happening, right? And we haven't quantified how big this problem is. Academia, we need them to get involved, help us build out training programs, awareness programs. We need their graduate level students to come in and work on these programs. We need them to do training with tribal colleges, and so that the young kids at tribal colleges can go out and take this mission on themselves, right? In organizations, there are a lot of organizations that support foundations and very large organizations that support through financial means as well. We need them to jump into this. If we all put our resources together, this is a problem that we can solve very easily. This is not some complex issue. there are people going missing, and right now there aren't the resources to find them or to find out what happened to them if they never come home or if their body is discovered. We can turn a body recovery into a rescue with not very much effort. Right? This is not a hard problem to solve. And there is no reason, there's no good reason on the planet that young girls and young men are going missing and nobody's looking for them. It's a stupid problem to have. So I have no problem with twisting people's arms and telling them, hey, look, you gotta come help us, right? And those who don't want to help us, I don't know what I need to say to get you to help us, but these are young Americans in our country. This is not Ukraine. This is not Haiti. This is not any number of other places. These are Americans in our country that need our help.
I agree, and I agree. So often, issues impacting Native Americans are completely ignored, and here we are in the midst of Native American Heritage Month. I spoke to a class of college students, and yesterday, and I think there were, let's say there were about 18, 20 kids in the class. I asked, how many of you are even aware it's Native American Heritage Month? One hand went up, and so. Yeah. I guess that's why Native News Online exists, right? We're out there constantly sounding hopefully doing the messaging the way we should, sounding the alarm if you say it that way. But that's what it's about. But it is about getting that word out. And you bring up Indian boarding schools. Only 90% of Americans still have no knowledge of what happened at Indian boarding schools.
No. When the recent news hit with the boarding schools, I think most Americans were like, what is this story? Nobody knows what's going on.
Yeah. I've actually been on radio stations saying, just to be clear, we're not talking about boarding schools where the rich people send their children to be refined.
Absolutely.
These were some horrific situations that took place. Yes. And here we are, and like I say, Native American Heritage Month. We so much to be proud of in terms of our culture, the beauty of our culture historically, and languages are being restored or revitalized is the best way to say it. But not enough. So we're looking at all those things, but this issue is so profound, and you're exactly right. If it was non-native, pretty Caucasian blonde girl, the helicopters are out looking. And I've actually said in speeches, our people are pretty too, and handsome, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
But so I really do appreciate what you're doing, and what I'm going to ask you to do: come back and see us again, and let's highlight some of the things you're making and kind of track some of the progress, because I think
absolutely
a lot of times that's what happens in the news. But Native News Online, we like to do the follow-up so that we can track progress, and it's not.
I'd love it.
Not a one and done, but it's, hey, we're all in this together, and hopefully we're going to make it for a better Native American, in Indian country, Native American Indian country. So thank you very much.
One last thing I'll say
is
that if you're watching this interview and you believe that this is a problem, pick up the phone, call your council member, call your state representative, call your federal representative, and tell them that you support this project, Task Force Red Hand, the Traverse Project, and help is coming. Help is coming.
I really do appreciate this, and to our viewers, Chi Miigwech, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Native Bidaské. We sometimes we bring some hard cases, talking about stories that we talk about here on Native Bidaské, but the missing and murdered Indigenous people really is a very significant problem in Indian country. And so in the meantime, young people, hug the elders, take care of everybody, and let's do this together. So Chi Miigwech, tune in again next week for another edition of Native Bidaské.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
November is Native American Heritage Month. Our people have thousands of years of history on this land, but we also play a vital role in contemporary society. We are astronauts, physicians, and attorneys. We are journalists, entrepreneurs, and fashion icons. We serve our country. At Native News Online, we celebrate Native American heritage every day of the year with stories about our relatives who are making news and leading change. We are free and independent Indigenous-led media. We are trusted in Indian country. Our role goes beyond reporting the news. We make an impact by informing and uplifting our people. Our mission is to make sure Native people are seen, heard, understood, and valued. That's why we've written hundreds of stories about Indian boarding schools, the repatriation of our ancestors, missing and murdered Indigenous people, and the overdose epidemic in Indian country. Because we know when tribal communities come together and stand united, there can be healing for our elders and for generations to come. Native American Heritage Month is a great time to show your support for Native news. Please give from your heart so we can celebrate Native voices year-round.